When the last torch disappeared beyond the trees, the Omega girl understood the truth no one had been brave enough to say aloud. They were not coming back. The tiny flames bobbed between the ancient trunks for a few moments longer, swallowed one by the darkness until only the cold glow of the rising moon remained. The voices that had mocked her during the long walk into the wilderness faded into silence, leaving behind nothing but the whisper of restless branches swaying high above. The ancient forest had taken hunters, warriors, kings, and entire patrols without leaving behind a single bone. Mothers frightened their children with stories of its endless shadows. Travelers crossed themselves whenever its black treetops appeared beyond the mountains. Yet before dawn, wolves surrounded the abandoned Omega instead of tearing her apart. Why would the oldest predators in the kingdom protect the weakest girl anyone had ever known? Why did the largest silver wolf lower his proud head before her as though greeting someone he had waited centuries to meet? And beneath the roots of that forgotten forest, what ancient promise had begun to awaken the very moment the world decided she no longer deserved to live? Autumn always arrived early in Ashen Hollow. Snow touched the highest peaks while golden leaves still clung stubbornly to the trees below, and cold mountain winds carried the smell of pine, smoke, and stone through every narrow street. The kingdom had been carved directly into the mountainside centuries ago. Towering walls of grey rock protected its people from invaders, while wooden homes climbed the slopes like birds' nests, each roof layered with dark cedar shingles that had weathered countless winters. It was a kingdom that admired only one thing: strength. Children learned to wrestle before they learned to read. Boys dreamed of becoming alphas. Girls trained to serve powerful bloodlines. Even laughter sounded competitive, as though every smile needed permission from someone stronger. There was little room for kindness. And there was almost none for an Omega. Long before sunrise, while most of the village still slept beneath warm blankets, one small figure was already walking the forest paths carrying an old woven basket over her shoulder. Her name was Elara. She moved quietly through the morning mist, careful not to disturb the sleeping birds nestled among the branches. Frost coated the grass beneath her worn boots, crunching softly with every careful step. The chill bit through the sleeves of her faded cloak until her fingertips turned pale, yet she never hurried. The forest had its own rhythm. Rush through it, and you missed everything. She paused beside a patch of wild herbs growing beneath a fallen cedar. Kneeling carefully, she brushed away damp leaves before cutting only the healthiest stems. "Leave enough," she whispered to herself. "There must always be more tomorrow." No one had taught her those words. The forest had. As she continued climbing the narrow trail, a faint sound reached her ears. Not a bird. Not the wind. A cry. She stopped instantly. The sound came again. Weak. Painful. Hidden. Following it through tangled ferns, she found a young mountain hare trapped beneath a broken hunting snare someone had forgotten to collect. Its tiny chest rose and fell rapidly. Its frightened eyes reflected the pale morning light. Elara slowly lowered herself onto the damp earth. "It's all right." Her voice barely rose above the whispering leaves. "I'm not here to hurt you." The frightened animal struggled harder. The wire cut deeper. Blood stained its white fur. She bit her lip. There were herbs in her basket worth several silver coins. Medicine the village elders had demanded before noon. But without hesitation she removed her small knife and carefully cut through the twisted wire. The frightened hare remained frozen for several long breaths. Then it limped away into the undergrowth. Elara smiled despite the blood now running across her own fingers where the wire had sliced her skin. "It will heal." She wrapped the cut with a strip torn from the edge of her sleeve. It needed it more. By the time she returned to Ashen Hollow, the village had fully awakened. Smoke curled from stone chimneys. Blacksmiths hammered glowing iron. Merchants arranged apples, dried fish, and wool blankets across market stalls. Children raced through the streets laughing. Until they noticed her. The laughter changed. "There she is. The cursed girl. My mother said don't stand too close. They say wolves howl whenever she walks alone." Another stone rolled across the road and struck her boot. Not hard enough to injure. Just enough to remind her where she belonged. She lowered her eyes and kept walking. The insults no longer surprised her. They had become as ordinary as snowfall. Near the village well, an elderly woman waited with folded arms. "You took too long. I found someone who needed help." The woman frowned. "You mean another animal?" Elara quietly nodded. The old woman snatched the basket from her hands, digging through the herbs without offering thanks. "You'll never survive if you keep wasting time on creatures." She turned away. Elara simply watched her disappear into the crowd. No anger crossed her face. Only quiet acceptance. By afternoon she had already moved on to another task. An old shepherd's dog had injured its paw climbing rocky cliffs above the valley. The shepherd himself barely acknowledged her arrival. "It's over there." He pointed without looking. "If it dies, don't expect payment." The old sheepdog lay beneath a wooden fence, breathing heavily. One paw had swollen badly. The animal growled weakly when she approached. Instead of forcing herself closer, Elara sat several feet away. The wind carried fallen leaves between them. She waited. Minutes passed. Eventually the old dog crawled toward her on its own. Its tired head rested gently against her knee. Only then did she begin cleaning the wound. By sunset the swelling had already begun to ease. The shepherd inspected the bandage. That single sound was all the gratitude she received. She smiled anyway. As darkness settled across the valley, enormous bronze bells echoed from the mountain temple. 1, 2, 3. Every villager stopped what they were doing. The bells only rang when the High Alpha summoned the kingdom. People filled the central square beneath towering stone statues of ancient rulers, whose stern faces watched over generations of fear and obedience. Elara remained near the edge of the crowd. Invisible. As always. Then the High Alpha appeared. Lord Varrock stood taller than every guard surrounding him. Heavy black armor rested across broad shoulders lined with wolf fur. A crimson cloak flowed behind him, moving with every gust of mountain wind. His sharp grey eyes swept across the gathering. Silence followed. Even restless children stopped moving. Varrock slowly raised one hand. "Our harvest has failed." His voice echoed from the stone walls. "Our rivers grow thin. Our hunters vanish. And the wolves have returned." Uneasy whispers spread through the crowd. Everyone had heard the howls recently. Long. Strange. Closer than before. "Our ancestors warned us." Varrock continued. "When wolves abandon their ancient paths, the curse walks among us." Several frightened faces lowered toward the ground. An elderly priest stepped forward carrying an enormous leather-bound book. Its pages looked older than the kingdom itself. Dust drifted into the cold air as he carefully opened it. "The ancient prophecy speaks clearly." His trembling voice carried across the square. "When harvest dies. When beasts awaken. When the moon refuses peace. The weakest blood shall carry the shadow." The crowd exchanged nervous glances. Varrock slowly descended the temple steps. Each boot echoed heavily against the stone. He walked directly toward the edge of the crowd. Toward Elara. She looked up only when his shadow covered her completely. "You." Every eye turned. Thousands of silent faces. She felt their stares long before anyone spoke. "No." Someone whispered. "It can't be." Varrock studied the faded birthmark resting just beneath her collarbone where her cloak had slipped aside. A pale silver crescent unlike any ordinary scar. "The mark." His voice remained calm. "It has appeared." Fear spread through the crowd like wildfire racing through dry grass. Several villagers immediately stepped backward. Others crossed themselves. A child began crying. Varrock turned toward the gathering once more. "The prophecy has chosen." "No." Elara whispered. "I've done nothing." But her words disappeared beneath growing panic. "The curse. She brought it. I knew something was wrong. My livestock died last spring. The wolves came because of her." Every accusation crashed together until individual voices became impossible to separate. Elara looked desperately around the crowd. The shepherd whose dog she had healed. The elderly woman she served every week. The children who scraped knees she had bandaged. Not one stepped forward. Not one spoke for her. Not one remembered her kindness. Fear had erased every good deed she had ever done. Varrock lifted both hands. The square fell silent once again. There is only one path. The priest slowly nodded. The ancient rite. Cold realization settled over Elara. The rite of offering. Every child knew the story. Whenever darkness threatened the kingdom, the chosen sacrifice would be abandoned within the ancient forest before winter's first snowfall. No one had ever returned. The decision came before sunset. No trial. No evidence. No mercy. Only fear wearing the mask of justice. That night, thick ropes bound Elara's wrists, not because she resisted, but because tradition demanded it. The procession climbed narrow mountain trails beneath a sky crowded with stars. Torches hissed against the rising wind, throwing long shadows across ancient stones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Hours passed. The mountains slowly disappeared behind them. The trees grew taller, older. Their branches twisted together until moonlight struggled to reach the forest floor. One by one, even the soldiers stopped speaking. No one liked standing this close to the ancient forest. Its silence felt unnatural. At the forest's edge stood an enormous arch formed by two living trees whose trunks had grown together over countless generations. The bark bore strange carvings no one could read anymore. The captain untied the ropes from Elara's wrists. For just a moment, his weathered face softened. He almost looked ashamed. Almost. Walk. His voice was barely audible. She looked past him toward the villagers. Not a single familiar face met her eyes. Some stared at the ground. Others watched the trees instead. The high Alpha alone remained perfectly still. Waiting. Elara drew one slow breath. Then another. Without pleading. Without screaming. She stepped beneath the ancient arch. The forest swallowed her almost immediately. Behind her came the sound of retreating footsteps. Then horses. Then distant voices. Torchlight flickered between the trees one final time. One light disappeared. Then another. Then the last. Silence returned. The wind shifted gently through the towering pines. Somewhere deep beyond the darkness, a lone wolf released a long, haunting howl. Then another answered. Then another. Elara slowly turned. Far between the trees, pairs of glowing golden eyes had begun opening in the darkness, one after another, until she realized. She was no longer alone. For several long heartbeats, Elara did not move. The glowing eyes remained scattered between the trees, steady and unblinking, floating like silent stars beneath the dark canopy. They neither rushed toward her nor slipped away into the shadows. They simply watched. The forest held its breath. Even the wind seemed unwilling to disturb whatever ancient moment had begun. Elara's pulse hammered inside her chest. Every story she had heard since childhood echoed through her mind. Wolves that hunted without mercy. Spirits that lured travelers into endless darkness. Bones hidden beneath moss where no one would ever find them again. She tightened her fingers around the small basket that still hung from her shoulder. It contained only a few herbs, a water skin nearly empty, and the little knife she used for gathering plants. It would not protect her. Nothing could. A low growl rolled softly through the trees. Another answered somewhere farther away. The wolves began to move. Not running. Walking. Large shapes emerged one after another from between ancient oaks, their thick coats shimmering beneath pale moonlight. Some were grey as mountain stone. Others carried deep shades of brown and black. A few were so old that silver seemed to have replaced every strand of fur across their backs. There were dozens. Perhaps more. They surrounded her without making a sound. Elara swallowed hard. She lowered her eyes. Not in surrender. In respect. She had learned long ago that frightened animals understood quiet far better than panic. If this is the end. Her whisper disappeared into the cold air. Please let it be quick. No wolf answered. Instead, the largest among them stepped forward. He was unlike any wolf she had ever imagined. His shoulders nearly reached her chest. Thick silver fur flowed around his neck like the maner of an ancient lion. One long scar crossed his muzzle, disappearing beneath one calm amber eye that carried the weight of countless winters. He looked old. Not weak. Ancient. The silver wolf stopped only a few feet away. His nose lifted slightly as he caught her scent. Elara remained perfectly still. Her breathing became slow. Careful. The wolf took another step. Then another. Until only the length of an outstretched arm separated them. The forest seemed to disappear. There was only the girl. And the old wolf. He lowered his massive head. Slowly. Deliberately. His nose gently touched the back of her trembling hand. Warm breath drifted across her cold fingers. Elara blinked. She had prepared herself for teeth. Instead, she felt trust. A single tear escaped before she even realized she was crying. The silver wolf lifted his head again. Behind him, the rest of the pack relaxed almost instantly. Tails lowered. Ears softened. The tension that had filled the clearing vanished as though carried away by the night breeze. It was as if one decision from their elder had spoken for every wolf present. She belonged. At least. For tonight. A sharp crack echoed somewhere above. Elara looked up just as heavy rain began pouring through the branches. The storm arrived without warning. Mounting clouds swallowed the moon. Wind roared across the treetops until enormous pines groaned under its strength. Within moments her cloak was soaked. Cold water streamed down her hair and into her eyes. Lightning flashed beyond the mountains, revealing towering trees stretching endlessly in every direction. She had nowhere to hide. The wolves immediately became restless. Several younger ones disappeared into the darkness. Others circled the clearing, noses raised toward the wind. The silver wolf barked once. Short. Firm. The entire pack began moving. He looked back at Elara. Then walked away. After several steps he paused. Looked back again. Waiting. She hesitated only a moment before following. I hope. She whispered softly. You know where we're going. The wolves guided her through paths she never would have noticed alone. Roots twisted across the ground like sleeping serpents. Ancient stones covered in glowing moss marked invisible trails beneath the forest floor. Rain continued falling in heavy sheets, yet somehow the wolves never lost their way. After nearly an hour of walking, another sound reached them. Soft. Weak. A cry. Elara stopped immediately. The wolves continued a few more steps before noticing she had fallen behind. The cry came again. Not human. Young. She pushed aside dripping ferns until she reached a fallen cedar whose enormous trunk blocked part of the narrow trail. There, beneath tangled branches, a tiny wolf pup struggled desperately. One hind leg had become trapped beneath heavy wood. Mud covered its fur. Its frightened blue-gray eyes widened the moment it saw her. The little creature snapped weakly. Not from anger. From terror. Several adult wolves instantly surrounded the fallen tree. Deep growls vibrated through the rain. One wrong movement. One sign of danger. And they would defend the pup without hesitation. Elara slowly knelt. She ignored the cold mud soaking through her clothes. It's all right. Her voice remained calm despite the pounding of her own heart. I'm not taking you away. The pup whimpered again. Its tiny body shook uncontrollably. She carefully tested the weight of the broken branch. Far too heavy. She would never lift it alone. Her eyes searched the ground. A fallen limb. Long enough. Strong enough. She dragged it through the mud and wedged it beneath the larger branch. Using every bit of strength she possessed, she leaned her full weight onto the makeshift lever. The wood groaned. Shifted. Only slightly. Her arms trembled violently. Rain blurred her vision. The branch slipped. She nearly fell. Again she pushed. Again. Again. At last the heavy log lifted just enough. The frightened pup pulled free with a frightened cry. The branch crashed back into place. Elara fell backward into the mud, breathing hard. The little wolf stumbled several uncertain steps. Then collapsed. Its injured leg twisted awkwardly beneath it. Without thinking, Elara crawled closer. The adult wolves watched every movement. No one attacked. She gently examined the swollen leg. Only sprained. She smiled faintly. "You'll be chasing rabbits again soon." Carefully she wrapped the tiny limb with strips torn from the bottom of her already ragged cloak. The pup stopped trembling. Instead of snapping, it licked her muddy hand. A soft rumble spread through the surrounding wolves. Not threatening. Almost approving. The Silver Elder watched quietly from beneath the rain. For the first time, his tail moved. Just once. A slow, gentle sweep across the wet earth. The storm grew fiercer. Thunder rolled endlessly above the mountains. Night deepened until the forest became almost impossible to see. Without another sound, the silver wolf turned once more and continued leading the way. This time the pack stayed much closer around Elara. Not trapping her. Protecting her. Several younger wolves walked ahead, clearing the narrow path. 2 remained behind, watching the darkness they had left. Hours later, the forest suddenly opened into a hidden clearing unlike anything Elara had ever seen. An enormous oak stood at its center. It was older than imagination itself. Its trunk was so wide that 10 grown men holding hands could not have surrounded it. Its branches stretched across the clearing like the roof of a forgotten cathedral. Most astonishing of all, the center of the giant tree had become hollow long ago, creating a vast natural chamber large enough to shelter dozens of wolves from the storm. Dry leaves covered the floor. The scent of old wood filled the warm air inside. The wolves entered one by one. The Silver Elder looked toward Elara. She understood. Slowly she stepped inside. The storm remained outside. Only soft rain echoed against the ancient bark. For the first time since entering the forest, she felt warm. As the wolves settled around her, Elara noticed something strange. The inner walls of the hollow tree were covered with carvings. Not random scratches. Symbols. Beautiful. Ancient. Circles intertwined with crescent moons. Running wolves. Towering mountains. Hands reaching toward paws. She brushed her fingertips across one smooth carving. So someone lived here. She whispered. The silver wolf lifted his head. His eyes rested upon the symbols for several quiet moments before lowering again. As though remembering. As though mourning. Exhaustion slowly overcame her. The warmth. The steady breathing of the wolves. The rhythmic sound of rain. She rested against the inside of the ancient trunk. Within moments, sleep claimed her. She dreamed. Not ordinary dreams. Memories. Or perhaps something even older. She stood within the same forest. Yet everything looked different. The trees were brighter. Flowers covered the ground. Children laughed among wolves without fear. Men and women walked beside great silver beasts as equals, neither master nor servant. At the center of a vast stone circle stood a young king dressed in white, his hand resting upon the head of a magnificent black wolf whose golden eyes reflected the moon itself. Beside them stood a young woman wearing a silver cloak. Across her shoulder, the same crescent-shaped birthmark glowed softly beneath the moonlight. Voices rose together. Not spoken. Sung. Promises. Oaths. A bond older than kingdoms. Then, fire. Screams shattered the peace. The beautiful forest darkened. Steel flashed. Blood-stained sacred stones. The wolves howled. Humans turned their weapons against the very creatures that had once guarded them. The king disappeared beneath smoke. The woman reached toward him. But countless shadows pulled them apart. Everything dissolved into darkness. Only one sentence remained, carried gently upon the wind. When kindness returns, so shall the promise. Elara reached toward the fading voices. Wait. The dream vanished. Morning sunlight filtered gently through the branches overhead. Birdsong replaced thunder. The storm had passed. For a few peaceful moments, she forgot where she was. Then warm fur brushed lightly against her arm. The little wolf pup lay sleeping beside her, its bandaged legs stretched comfortably across dry leaves. Several adult wolves rested nearby. Others had already left the shelter. The Silver Elder waited outside, watching the forest. Elara smiled. Good morning. The old wolf glanced toward her. His ears twitched. Almost like greeting. She stepped out beneath the crisp morning air. Mist floated across the clearing. Raindrops clung to every leaf, turning the entire forest into a sea of sparkling crystal. It was beautiful, alive, untouched by the cruelty beyond its borders. Then something caught her attention. The soft earth surrounding the ancient oak was covered with fresh tracks. Huge tracks, much larger than the prints left by the Silver Elder. Each one sank deep into the wet ground. Their stride was impossibly long. Whoever, or whatever, had walked around the tree during the night possessed a size beyond anything she had ever imagined. She slowly followed the trail with her eyes. The tracks circled the oak once, twice, then disappeared into the deeper forest. The wolves had noticed them too. Not one tried to follow. Even the Silver Elder remained perfectly still, staring silently toward the dark valley where the giant footprints vanished. For the first time since the wolves had accepted her, Elara saw uncertainty in their eyes. And somewhere far beyond the morning mist, something enormous answered with a low, distant howl that did not sound entirely like any wolf she had ever heard. The strange howl lingered in the morning air long after the sound itself had faded. It rolled through the towering pines like distant thunder, deep enough to make frost drift from the highest branches. Birds burst from the treetops in frightened flocks before settling again somewhere beyond the valley. Even the wind seemed to change direction, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and old stone. Elara remained where she stood. Her eyes stayed fixed on the enormous tracks disappearing into the mist. They were too wide, too deep. Each print looked as though the earth itself had sighed beneath the weight of whatever had passed through the clearing during the night. She glanced toward the Silver Elder. He lowered his nose close to one of the tracks but did not step inside it. Instead, he backed away. Very slowly. Respect. Not fear. The difference was small, yet unmistakable. The rest of the pack copied him without hesitation. No wolf crossed the trail. It was as though an invisible line had been drawn across the forest floor. Elara frowned. Who made them? No answer came. Only the soft rustling of leaves overhead. The Silver Elder finally turned away from the mysterious trail and began walking east, his pace calm and steady. The wolves followed. After a moment's hesitation, Elara adjusted the worn basket on her shoulder and walked after them. Whatever had left those footprints, the wolves clearly believed today was not the day to search for it. Morning light filtered through layers of emerald leaves, painting shifting patterns across the forest floor. Every step carried them deeper into a world untouched by human hands. The trees became larger, older. Their trunks twisted together like giant pillars supporting the sky itself. Bright green moss covered fallen logs so thickly they looked like soft hills. Tiny streams slipped between polished stones, their clear water singing gentle songs that echoed beneath the branches. Sunlight occasionally pierced the canopy in narrow golden beams, turning floating dust and drifting seeds into tiny stars suspended in the air. Elara had gathered herbs near forests her entire life. She had believed she knew nature. Now she realized she had only ever stood at its doorstep. This place felt ancient beyond memory. Nothing here seemed ordinary. Flowers bloomed in colors she had never seen before. Blue butterflies shimmered with wings that reflected silver whenever they crossed the light. White foxes watched quietly from distant hills before disappearing without leaving footprints. Even the silence carried life. The forest breathed. By midday they reached a narrow river. Its water flowed so clear that every pebble resting beneath the surface appeared close enough to touch. Elara knelt beside the bank. She cupped cool water into her hands. As she drank, tiny silver fish gathered around her reflection instead of swimming away. She smiled. "You aren't very afraid." One curious fish nudged her fingertips before darting beneath a stone. The little wolf pup she had rescued limped awkwardly to the river beside her. Its bandaged leg was healing well, though it still favored the injured paw. Elara reached into her basket. Only a small piece of dried bread remained. She broke it carefully. Half for herself, half for the pup. The tiny wolf sniffed the bread before nudging it back toward her. She laughed softly. "No." The pup nudged her hand again, as though insisting. Her smile faded into quiet emotion. "You think I need it more?" She gently rubbed behind its ears. "Then we'll share." She tore the bread into even smaller pieces. One for herself. One for the pup. Another for a curious raven that had landed nearby. The Silver Elder watched everything from beneath an old cedar tree. His amber eyes remained calm, patient, almost thoughtful. The journey continued. As afternoon stretched across the forest, Elara began noticing something unusual. Animals approached her naturally. A squirrel climbed onto a nearby branch instead of fleeing. Deer watched openly from patches of sunlight. Songbirds landed close enough that she could hear the flutter of their tiny wings. The wolves noticed as well. One young grey wolf tilted his head curiously as two bright robins landed beside Elara while she rested near a fallen log. She smiled without realizing anyone watched. The birds hopped around her boots, pecking gently at scattered seeds before flying away again. The young wolf looked almost confused. The Silver Elder gave a soft rumble deep within his chest. Not amusement. Approval. Late that afternoon, the peaceful rhythm of the forest broke. One of the scouts returned at full speed. His paws barely touched the ground. He barked sharply 3 times. Every wolf froze. The Silver Elder lifted his head immediately. His ears pointed toward the western hills. Another bark answered in the distance. Then another. The message spread through the forest faster than any human rider could have traveled. Something was coming. The Silver Elder looked toward Elara. His calm expression had vanished. Without warning, he began moving. Not walking. Running. The entire pack followed. Elara hurried after them. Branches whipped against her cloak as she struggled to keep pace. What happened? No one answered. The wolves climbed rocky slopes, crossed narrow streams, and disappeared between towering pines with astonishing speed. Elara stumbled more than once. Each time a wolf slowed just enough to make sure she regained her footing before racing ahead again. No one left her behind. Not once. Nearly an hour later they reached the top of a rocky ridge overlooking a broad valley. The wolves stopped. So did Elara. Smoke drifted upward through the trees below. Thin at first. Then thicker. Human smoke. Fresh. Her stomach tightened. She counted carefully. 1, 2, 5, 10. More. Campfires. Hidden beneath thick branches. Men. The Silver Elder stared silently toward the valley. Several younger wolves growled. Elara's voice dropped to a whisper. Hunters. She recognized the camp almost immediately. The tents. The banners. The leather armor. Ashen Hollow. Her own kingdom. Her own people. They came after me. The words barely escaped her lips. The Silver Elder looked toward her. There was no anger in his eyes. Only understanding. Far below, soldiers unloaded crates filled with traps, crossbows, ropes, and iron cages. Hunting dogs pulled eagerly against heavy chains. Several men pointed toward different parts of the forest while studying rough maps spread across a fallen log. At the center of the camp stood a tall commander wearing the crest of the High Alpha. Elara recognized him instantly. Captain Darius. The very man who had untied the ropes from her wrists before sending her into the forest. His face looked harder now. Colder. He spoke with another officer while pointing directly toward the eastern woods. Toward them. They aren't searching for wolves. Elara whispered. They're searching for me. The wolves quietly retreated before the hunters could notice them. No branch snapped. No stone rolled. Within minutes the ridge looked untouched once more. Only after they had traveled a safe distance did the Silver Elder finally stop beside an enormous moss-covered boulder. He began scratching at the ground with one heavy paw. Leaves scattered aside. Dirt shifted. Beneath it, old stones appeared. Curious, Elara knelt beside him. Together they brushed away centuries of soil. More carvings emerged. Not random markings. The same crescent moons she had seen inside the great oak. Running wolves. Stars. And something else. Hands joined together. Human. Wolf. One promise. One family. At the center of the weathered stone rested a symbol unlike the others. A crescent moon wrapped around a blooming white flower. Elara stared. Her breath caught. Slowly. Almost without thinking, she pulled back the collar of her cloak. The pale birthmark beneath her shoulder matched the carving perfectly. Every curve. Every line. Exactly. Her fingertips trembled as she touched both the stone and the mark on her skin. "How?" she whispered. The silver elder lowered his head. Not to the stone. To her. The rest of the pack followed. One by one. Every wolf bowed. Not out of submission. Recognition. Elara stepped backward in disbelief. "No." She shook her head. "You've made a mistake." She was only an abandoned Omega. A girl nobody wanted. A healer who spent her days mending broken wings and injured paws. Nothing more. The wolves remained exactly where they were. Heads lowered. Patient. As though they had all the time in the world. A cool breeze drifted across the clearing. Somewhere above, clouds parted just enough for sunlight to fall directly upon the ancient carving. The stone seemed almost to glow beneath the golden light. For one impossible moment, the mark on Elara's shoulder grew warm. Not painful. Comforting. Like the gentle touch of sunlight after a long winter. She gasped softly. The warmth disappeared as quickly as it had come. Silence returned. But nothing felt the same anymore. That evening the wolves led her farther than they had ever traveled before. The forest gradually changed again. The towering pines gave way to ancient ruins hidden beneath climbing ivy and flowering vines. Broken stone walls leaned beneath the weight of centuries. Massive columns lay scattered across soft grass where wildflowers now bloomed between cracked marble. Nature had not destroyed this place. It had embraced it. At the center of the ruins stood a circular shrine. Half its roof had collapsed long ago, allowing moonlight to spill across the worn floor. Stone wolves lined the outer ring. Though weathered by time, each statue still seemed ready to breathe. Elara walked slowly among them. She brushed dust from one carved face. Its features looked strangely familiar. Not identical, but close enough to remind her of the Silver Elder. The little wolf pup bounded happily between the statues before settling beside her feet. She smiled. This place must have been beautiful. The Silver Elder walked into the center of the shrine. He sat quietly beneath the open sky. The rest of the pack surrounded the circle. No one made a sound. The silence itself felt sacred. Elara looked upward. Stars glittered above the broken roof like scattered diamonds. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming night flowers. For the first time in many days, she felt hope. Perhaps the forest truly had chosen to protect her. Perhaps she had finally found somewhere she belonged. Then, a sound shattered the peace. A hunting horn. Long. Sharp. Close. Another answered from the opposite side of the ruins. Then another. Dogs barked wildly. Branches snapped beneath hurried boots. Voices echoed through the trees. "They're here." The Silver Elder sprang to his feet. Every wolf turned toward the surrounding darkness. Torches flickered between the ancient columns. Captain Darius had found the forgotten shrine. And this time, he had brought an army. The first arrow struck stone before anyone saw the archers. Its iron tip shattered against the shoulder of a weathered wolf statue, sending chips of pale rock scattering across the ancient shrine. The sharp crack echoed through the silent ruins like the breaking of a sacred promise. The wolves reacted instantly. Growls rolled through the circle. Several younger wolves leaped in front of Elara without waiting for a command, forming a living wall between her and the forest beyond. Their ears flattened against their heads as their eyes searched every shadow. Another arrow hissed through the air. This one buried itself deep inside an old cedar. A third passed so close to Elara that she felt the wind brush across her cheek. Captain Darius stepped out from between the broken columns, a torch burning in one hand while a drawn sword rested in the other. Nearly 40 soldiers spread out behind him. Their armor reflected the orange glow of the flames, turning the ruined sanctuary into a battlefield of dancing light and long shadows. Hunting dogs strained against heavy chains, barking wildly at the wolves. No one moved. For one long moment, both sides simply watched each other. Darius slowly removed his helmet. His tired eyes settled on Elara. "I hoped," he said quietly, "that the stories were wrong." Elara slowly shook her. His voice held none of the hatred carried by the other soldiers. Only disappointment. You survived. Elara took one careful step forward. I never wanted any of this. One nervous soldier laughed bitterly. Listen to the witch. Another spat onto the ground. She's bewitched the beasts. Darius raised one hand, silencing them. Come with us willingly. His eyes never left Elara. And no blood needs to be spilled. She looked at the wolves surrounding her. The little pup pressed tightly against her leg. The silver elder stood beside her shoulder, calm but ready. They had saved her when her own people had abandoned her. How could she leave them now? They'll kill you, she whispered. The silver elder did not move. He simply stood beside her, as though the answer had already been given. Elara slowly shook her head. I won't leave them. Disappointment crossed Darius's face. Then he lowered his helmet once more. So be it. He lifted his sword. Take the girl. The forest exploded into motion. Soldiers rushed between the broken pillars with shields raised high. The wolves met them halfway. Grey shapes darted through smoke and moonlight, moving so quickly that the human eye struggled to follow them. They did not attack to kill. Instead, they knocked shields aside, forced men backward, and broke the lines before they could surround the shrine. Steel clashed against stone. Dogs barked furiously. Torches fell into damp grass, sending sparks spinning through the night. Elara remained frozen for only a heartbeat. Then she saw a frightened hunting dog caught beneath its own tangled chain as panicked soldiers stumbled around it. The poor animal twisted desperately, choking itself with every struggle. Without thinking, she ran. Elara! A soldier shouted. But she ignored him. She dropped to her knees beside the terrified dog. It's all right. The animal snapped wildly. Not at her. At fear itself. She carefully loosened the twisted chain wrapped around its neck. There! The dog collapsed against the ground, coughing. Instead of biting her, it stumbled away into the darkness. A nearby soldier stared in disbelief. She! His voice faltered. She just saved our dog. Before anyone could react, another wave of wolves burst through the ruins. The battle surged onward. The fight spread beyond the ancient shrine. Torches rolled beneath thick roots. Dry leaves caught fire. At first the flames were small, almost harmless. Then the mountain wind changed. One gust. Then another. The fire leaped from bush to bush. Dead branches crackled loudly overhead. Within minutes bright orange flames climbed the trunks of ancient pines, casting terrifying shadows across the forest. Smoke thickened. Birds burst screaming from burning nests. Deer fled through the undergrowth. Foxes raced between frightened soldiers and wolves alike. The forest itself had become trapped in the battle. No! Elara whispered. She looked around desperately. Everywhere animals were running. Some escaped. Others could not. A young fawn cried from beneath a fallen branch already surrounded by fire. Several rabbits huddled beneath burning brush with nowhere left to run. Even the wolves hesitated. Not because they feared the flames. Because they heard the cries. Elara ran toward them. The heat struck her face immediately. Someone grabbed her arm. A soldier. Are you mad? The forest's burning. She pulled free. There are still lives inside. She disappeared into the smoke before anyone could stop her. The world became orange. Ash drifted through the air like black snow. Breathing hurt. Every breath filled her lungs with smoke. She wrapped part of her torn cloak across her mouth and pushed deeper between burning trees. The frightened fawn struggled desperately beneath a heavy branch. Its small legs kicked helplessly. Flames crept closer with every passing second. Elara threw herself against the branch. It barely moved. Again. Nothing. She searched frantically until she spotted a broken sapling nearby. Using it as a lever, she forced the branch upward. Wood groaned. The fawn scrambled free just before the burning limb collapsed completely. Go! The tiny deer vanished into thick smoke. She barely had time to stand before another cry reached her ears. Bird chicks. Somewhere above. She looked upward. A nest balanced dangerously upon a burning limb. Without thinking, she climbed. The bark scorched her hands. Smoke blurred her vision. The branch groaned beneath her weight. She reached the nest just as flames curled around its edge. 3 tiny hatchlings opened their beaks. Too young to fly. She carefully tucked them inside her basket beneath fresh herbs. The basket immediately filled with soft frightened chirping. Stay quiet. She climbed back down. The branch collapsed only moments later. A deafening crash echoed somewhere ahead. An enormous pine slowly tipped sideways before slamming into the forest floor, sending sparks high into the night. Beneath the fallen trunk, something moved. Huge. Black. Elara hurried closer. Her heart stopped. An enormous wolf lay pinned beneath the shattered tree. His coat was darker than midnight. Scars crossed his shoulders like pale rivers carved into stone. One heavy foreleg remained trapped beneath the trunk while blood soaked the earth beneath him. His breathing came in slow, painful bursts. Golden eyes met hers. Unlike any wolf she had ever seen. Old. Wise. Filled with unbearable exhaustion. He tried to rise. The tree refused to move. She looked around desperately. No one else was close. Only smoke. Fire. And the wounded giant. You have to hold on. She placed both hands against the burning trunk. It did not move. Again she pushed. Nothing. Her muscles screamed. Sweat mixed with soot across her face. The wolf watched silently, as though already accepting death. No. She shook her head fiercely. I'm not leaving you. Nearby, she spotted several broken stones from an ancient wall. An idea formed. One by one she dragged the heavy rocks toward the trunk. Then found another fallen beam. Using every lesson nature had quietly taught her over the years, she built another crude lever. The first attempt failed. The beam slipped. She nearly lost her balance. Again. Again. The wood creaked. The trunk shifted. Only an inch. Enough. The black wolf forced his trapped leg free. The enormous tree crashed back to the ground with a thunderous boom. The giant wolf staggered. Nearly collapsed. His injured leg shook violently beneath his weight. Elara immediately tore away another strip of her cloak. You've lost too much blood. She wrapped the wound as tightly as she could. The wolf lowered his massive head until his forehead gently rested against hers. Warm. Grateful. Ancient. For a brief moment. Everything else disappeared. The fire. The battle. The smoke. There was only quiet understanding between 2 wounded souls. Then the giant wolf suddenly lifted his head. His ears turned sharply toward the western ridge. A deep growl rumbled through his chest. Someone was coming. The silver elder appeared through the smoke. His beautiful coat was streaked with ash. One shoulder bled from a long cut left by a spear. Several wolves followed behind him, driving frightened animals toward a narrow stream where the flames had not yet reached. The moment he saw the wounded black wolf, the silver elder stopped. Then, to Elara's surprise, he lowered himself completely. Not in fear. In reverence. Every wolf behind him did the same. The enormous black wolf slowly acknowledged them with one calm glance. Then his eyes returned to Elara. Understanding flickered across the silver elder's face. He knew exactly who this stranger was. Elara did not. To her, he was simply another life worth saving. The battle outside grew louder. Captain Darius shouted fresh orders. Spread the fire. Drive them toward the cliffs. Several soldiers hesitated. The whole forest will burn. I gave an order. Torches flew deeper into the trees. Fresh flames erupted. The smoke darkened until the moon disappeared completely. The black wolf struggled to stand. His injured leg nearly gave way again. Elara slipped beneath one of his shoulders, helping support his immense weight despite how impossible the task seemed. We need somewhere safe. The silver elder barked once. The pack immediately formed around them. Not a chaotic retreat. A disciplined escort. Scouts raced ahead. Others guarded the rear. The younger wolves stayed close to frightened animals fleeing beside them. Even now, They protected every living creature they could. Elara looked back only once. The ancient shrine had disappeared behind a wall of fire. Stone wolves stood surrounded by flames, silent witnesses to another betrayal centuries after the first. The escape became a desperate race through smoke-filled valleys. Ash covered the ground. The air glowed red. More than once Elara stumbled over hidden roots, yet each time a wolf steadied her before she could fall. The wounded black wolf leaned heavily against her whenever his strength faltered. Despite his size, despite the blood staining his dark fur, he never growled, never complained. He simply kept moving, as though reaching whatever destination the Silver Elder had chosen mattered more than his own survival. Hours seemed to pass before the smell of smoke finally weakened. The roar of flames faded behind them. Cold mountain air returned. Ahead, towering cliffs rose from the forest floor. Between them opened the mouth of a vast cave hidden behind a curtain of cascading water. Moonlight reflected from the waterfall like liquid silver. The Silver Elder entered first. The others followed. Inside, the cave widened into a breathtaking chamber. Crystal-clear pools shimmered beneath glowing blue stones embedded naturally within the walls. Warm steam drifted gently through the air. The scent of fresh water replaced smoke. Peace settled over the exhausted wolves. Elara carefully helped the black wolf lie beside one of the steaming pools. As cool water trickled around the edges of the cavern, she dipped her trembling hands into the spring and gently cleaned the blood from his wounded leg. The water itself seemed strangely warm, almost alive. The torn flesh began closing before her eyes, slowly, impossibly, as though the spring carried an ancient healing power. She stared in amazement. Then she noticed something else. The black wolf had not taken his eyes off her once since she rescued him. Those brilliant golden eyes held neither the wildness of a beast nor the caution of a stranger. They carried the quiet sadness of someone who had lived far longer than anyone should. And somewhere deep within their silent gaze, Elara felt as though she was looking into the eyes of a king who had forgotten what it meant to hope. The hidden cavern slept beneath the mountain like a secret the world had forgotten. Outside, winter winds swept through the forest, carrying the last traces of smoke far beyond the snow-covered peaks. Inside, warm springs whispered through polished stone, their gentle currents filling the vast chamber with soft echoes that soothed even the most restless heart. For the first time since she had been abandoned, Elara allowed herself to breathe without fear. The wolves rested around the pools in quiet circles. Some slept with their noses tucked beneath thick tails. Others remained awake, standing watch at the cave entrance where thin curtains of falling water concealed the sanctuary from anyone passing outside. No wolf barked. No one needed to. Every creature inside understood they had survived only because they had stayed together. Elara knelt beside the wounded black wolf. The spring had washed away most of the blood covering his fur, revealing countless old scars hidden beneath his dark coat. Some were long and thin, as though left by blades. Others looked deeper, older, carved into him by battles fought years before she had even been born. He carried enough wounds for several lifetimes. Yet somehow, none of them had broken him. She dipped a clean strip of cloth into the warm spring and gently wiped soot from the fresh injury on his shoulder. "You've been fighting for a very long time." The black wolf remained still. Only his golden eyes followed her hands. "They must have hurt you badly." His ears shifted slightly, almost as though he understood every word. Perhaps he did. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it felt strangely natural. The little wolf pup limped into the chamber carrying something between its tiny teeth. A small white mushroom. It proudly dropped the strange gift beside Elara's knee before sitting down with its tail wagging enthusiastically. She laughed. "A present." The pup barked once. The sound echoed softly around the cavern. Several younger wolves lifted their heads. One by one, they disappeared into smaller tunnels branching away from the main chamber. Minutes later they returned carrying berries, edible roots, chestnuts, and wild herbs. One old she-wolf carefully placed fresh moss beside Elara to make a softer place for her to sleep. Another nudged a bundle of dry branches toward the edge of the warm spring where gentle heat would dry them for a fire. Elara looked around in astonishment. "They're taking care of me." The Silver Elder, resting nearby, slowly opened one eye. For a brief moment, something very close to pride softened his weathered face. The days that followed settled into a peaceful rhythm unlike anything Elara had ever known. Each morning sunlight filtered through cracks high above the cavern, painting shifting golden patterns across the pools. She gathered herbs growing near the waterfall while several wolves quietly accompanied her. She cleaned wounds left by the fire, removed thorns from tired paws, mixed healing salves from roots and flowers she found beneath the melting snow. The wolves never demanded her help. They simply waited patiently until she offered it. One by one they came. An old wolf whose shoulder had stiffened after many winters. A young scout whose paw still carried splinters from the burning forest. The little pup, who insisted on having his bandage checked every morning despite healing almost completely. She smiled every time. "You just like the attention." The pup responded by rolling onto his back. Several wolves watching nearby made soft rumbling sounds that almost resembled laughter. Even the silver elder seemed amused. Food, however, became harder to find. Winter tightened its grip across the mountains. Snow buried berry bushes beneath thick white blankets. Streams froze overnight. The forest grew quieter as many animals sought shelter deep beneath the earth. One evening Elara quietly counted the remaining dried herbs and nuts stored inside the cave. Not enough. Not for everyone. The wolves noticed. That night they returned from hunting carrying a young mountain goat. The silver elder gently nudged the fresh kill toward Elara. She looked at it. Then looked around the cavern. The youngest wolves watched hopefully. Several older wolves breathed heavily after a long day spent hunting through deep snow. The black wolf remained too injured to travel far. Elara smiled softly. "I'm not very hungry." She carefully divided the meat. The smallest wolves received the first portions. The elderly wolves next. The nursing mothers after them. The black wolf. The silver elder. Only when everyone else had eaten did she quietly nibble a few dried roots she had hidden inside her basket. No one seemed to notice. Except one. The black wolf. Golden eyes followed every movement she made. He watched her quietly chew the tasteless roots while pretending to enjoy them. He watched her wrap the remaining meat for the younger wolves. He watched the faint dizziness that crossed her face when she finally stood. But he said nothing. He simply remembered. Days turned into weeks. Snow continued falling. The cave became home. The wolves no longer treated Elara as a visitor. She belonged. One morning she awoke to discover the little pup curled against her side while two older wolves slept nearby, forming a warm wall that had protected her from the cold night air. Another afternoon she returned from gathering herbs to find several wolves waiting beside the cave entrance. The moment they spotted her, their tails began wagging. They had been worried. No one had ever waited for her before. Not in Ashen Hollow. There, she had always returned unnoticed. Forgotten. Here. Someone was always watching for her. Someone always seemed relieved when she came home. The realization settled quietly inside her heart. Home. The word no longer belonged only to the village that had abandoned her. The black wolf recovered far faster than anyone expected. Though he still limped slightly, each passing day restored more of his incredible strength. His presence carried a quiet authority unlike any other creature in the cave. The younger wolves instinctively stepped aside when he walked. Experienced hunters lowered their heads respectfully. Even the silver elder often watched him with silent admiration. Yet the black wolf never demanded obedience. Never growled unnecessarily. Never fought for dominance. His strength existed without needing to prove itself. One afternoon Elara found him standing alone beside the waterfall. Snow drifted softly beyond the curtain of water while sunlight turned every falling drop into liquid crystal. She approached carefully. "You're healing." The wolf glanced toward her. She smiled. "I knew you would." He stepped closer, then gently lowered his great head until she could reach behind one ear where dried blood still clung to thick black fur. "Hold still." She cleaned the last traces of the wound. The wolf remained perfectly calm. When she finished, he leaned lightly against her shoulder. Not because he needed support. Because he trusted her. Elara closed her eyes. She rested one hand against the side of his neck. His heartbeat echoed steadily beneath warm fur. Strong, patient, comforting. For a long while, neither moved. Outside, snow continued falling in perfect silence. Several days later, the black wolf disappeared before sunrise. Elara noticed almost immediately. So early. She looked around the cavern. Only the silver elder remained awake. He rose and gently nudged her toward the entrance. You know where he went. The elder walked into the snow. She followed. Fresh tracks stretched across the white landscape. Large, deep, easy to follow. They climbed narrow cliffs overlooking the valley before disappearing through a gap between towering rocks. Beyond the pass, Elara stopped in astonishment. An entirely different world opened before her. Hidden beneath the mountains lay an ancient valley untouched by time. Massive stone pillars rose from fields covered in untouched snow. Frozen waterfalls hung like glass curtains from towering cliffs. Crystal-clear lakes reflected the pale winter sky. Ancient statues stood half-buried beneath moss and ice. The black wolf waited patiently near the valley's center. When Elara reached him, he turned and continued walking, as though inviting her to follow. The valley ended at the entrance to an enormous underground sanctuary carved directly into the mountain. Its doors had collapsed centuries ago. Nature had slowly reclaimed the forgotten halls. Vines crept across carved pillars. Tree roots curled through broken stone ceilings. Yet despite the passing ages, the place remained breathtaking. Elara stepped carefully inside. Her footsteps echoed endlessly. Sunlight filtered through cracks above, illuminating walls covered with murals unlike anything she had ever seen. She walked closer. The paintings stretched for hundreds of feet. Not ordinary paintings. History. The first mural showed humans and wolves building villages together. Children laughing beside wolf pups. Hunters sharing food with great silver guardians. No fear. No chains. No masters. Only family. The next mural showed a magnificent king standing beneath a full moon. Beside him stood an enormous black wolf whose golden eyes looked astonishingly familiar. Above them floated a silver crescent embracing a white flower. The same symbol. Her symbol. Farther along, the murals darkened. Flames consumed villages. Men wearing crowns pointed swords toward kneeling wolves. Broken promises. Broken trust. Blood-stained sacred stones. The final mural showed one lone woman standing between both sides. Her hands reached toward wolves on one side. Humans on the other. Above her glowed the same crescent mark carried upon Elara's shoulder. Beneath the image rested ancient words carved into stone. Though she had never seen the language before, somehow, she understood. Not with her eyes. With something deeper. When kindness returns where fear once ruled. The moon's promise shall awaken once more. A warm pulse spread beneath the birthmark on her shoulder. The stone seemed to answer. The murals shimmered softly. The black wolf watched her carefully. His golden eyes reflected both hope and sorrow, as though he had waited countless years for someone to stand exactly where she stood now. Suddenly, a sharp whistle shattered the silence. Then another. The black wolf's ears snapped upright. His entire body tensed. Outside the sanctuary came the unmistakable sound of armored boots crunching across frozen snow. Voices. Human voices. Search every chamber. No one leaves alive. Elara's heart sank. The High Alpha soldiers had followed them through the mountains. And this time, they had found the place that history itself had tried to hide. The echo of iron boots rolled through the forgotten sanctuary long before the soldiers appeared. Each step bounced from pillar to pillar, turning the ancient halls into a maze of distant sounds. Snow drifted through the broken ceiling in slow white ribbons, settling across stone floors that had not known human footsteps for centuries. The black wolf stood perfectly still. His ears angled toward the entrance. The silver elder slipped silently into the chamber only moments later, followed by half a dozen scouts whose thick winter coats were dusted with fresh snow. One look passed between them. No growls. No panic. Only understanding. The enemy had found them. Elara instinctively stepped closer to the murals. She looked from the ancient carvings to the wolves gathered around her. I won't let them destroy this place. Her voice was barely louder than a whisper. The black wolf turned toward her. For a brief moment, his golden eyes softened. Then his expression hardened once more. He moved between her and the entrance. Captain Darius entered first. Behind him came nearly 50 soldiers carrying shields, crossbows, and burning lanterns that pushed back the sanctuary's ancient darkness. The moment they stepped inside, every man stopped. No one had expected to find such a place. Massive stone wolves lined the walls. Great pillars reached toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Murals stretched farther than lantern light could reveal. Even hardened soldiers stared in silence. One young guard crossed himself. "What is this place?" Another whispered. "It looks older than the kingdom." Darius slowly lowered his lantern. His tired eyes drifted across the paintings. Then they settled on Elara. She stood beside the black wolf. Neither of them moved. "Please." His voice echoed through the enormous hall. "Don't make this harder." Elara took a careful breath. "Call them back." "I can't." "You can." The High Alpha gave his command. The High Alpha lied. Several soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. Darius's jaw tightened. "I don't make those decisions." "No," Elara answered quietly. "But you decide whether innocent lives are worth protecting." The words lingered in the cold air. For the first time, Captain Darius lowered his eyes. The silence broke. Not by wolves. Not by Elara. By another officer. A broad-shouldered commander stepped past Darius with a cruel smile spreading beneath his beard. Commander Harlan. Unlike Darius, he carried no hesitation. No more talking. He pointed his sword toward Elara. "The Alpha wants the witch alive." Then toward the wolves. "The beasts are worth more as pelts." Several soldiers laughed nervously. Harlan raised his hand. "Loose arrows." Crossbows lifted. The wolves crouched. Time seemed to slow. "No!" Elara shouted. The first bolt flew. The black wolf lunged before she even saw it coming. The arrow struck his shoulder instead of her chest. He stumbled. A low growl shook the sanctuary. Not merely loud. Ancient. Every wolf answered at once. The forgotten halls came alive with the thunder of countless voices. The battle had begun again. Chaos swept through the sanctuary. The wolves darted between towering pillars, using the ancient ruins to break the soldiers' formations. Crossbow bolts shattered against stone. Lanterns crashed onto the floor, sending showers of sparks across centuries-old carvings. Elara rushed toward an injured scout whose side had been cut by an arrow. "Hold still." The young wolf whimpered but remained calm while she snapped the shaft and wrapped the wound with strips torn from her cloak. Another wolf nudged her urgently. A frightened raven had become trapped beneath fallen debris. She freed it. Moments later she found one terrified soldier pinned beneath a collapsed beam. The man reached desperately for his sword. Then stopped. Elara dropped beside him. She lifted one side of the broken stone just enough for him to crawl free. "You." The soldier stared at her. "You saved me." She simply nodded. "Go." He hesitated, then lowered his weapon before disappearing into the confusion. Nearby, several wolves witnessed everything. Not one questioned her choice. Compassion had become the language they all understood. Captain Darius fought only to defend himself. Twice he ordered his men to pull back from the murals. "Don't damage the walls. They're part of our history." Commander Harlan ignored him completely. "Burn it." One soldier threw a lantern toward the ancient paintings. Before it could strike, the little wolf pup leaped. The tiny wolf collided with the lantern in midair. Glass shattered harmlessly across the stone floor. Flames spread around the pup instead. Elara's heart nearly stopped. She ran through the fire without hesitation. The heat scorched her boots. She wrapped the frightened pup inside her cloak and rolled across the cold floor until the flames died. The little wolf trembled violently against her chest. "It's over." She held him close. "I've got you." Across the hall, even several soldiers stared in disbelief. Commander Harlan scowled. "Why does she keep saving animals?" No one answered. Perhaps because none of them truly understood kindness anymore. The fighting reached the sanctuary's deepest chamber. The Black Wolf's wounded shoulder bled again, yet he continued defending the narrow passage leading toward Elara. 3 soldiers charged together. None reached her. One by one, the great wolf knocked them aside without taking a single life. He fought like someone carrying enormous strength. And even greater restraint. Captain Darius watched in stunned silence. "They could have killed us." One older soldier beside him nodded slowly. "They chose not to." The realization spread quietly among the surviving men. The wolves were not monsters. Someone else had taught them to believe they were. A sharp horn echoed outside. Commander Harlan smiled. "They've arrived." Fresh footsteps thundered toward the sanctuary. Not dozens. Hundreds. More soldiers poured through the broken entrance carrying heavy chains, iron cages, and thick ropes. Ashen Hollow had sent nearly its entire winter garrison. The wolves slowly retreated around Elara. Not from fear. To protect her. Commander Harlan pointed directly toward her. "Take the Omega." This time, there were simply too many. The wolves fought with astonishing courage, but every passage became crowded with soldiers. Heavy nets fell from above. Iron chains wrapped around ancient pillars. Crossbows blocked every escape. The Silver Elder barked sharply. The pack immediately shifted formation. Not attacking. Evacuating. The youngest wolves. The injured. The mothers. Every healthy wolf began creating a path toward hidden tunnels beneath the sanctuary. Elara understood instantly. "They're saving the pups." Without thinking, she joined them. She carried the little wolf against her chest while guiding frightened cubs toward the narrow escape passage. One after another they disappeared safely into darkness. Then, a rough hand seized her arm. "Commander Harlan. I've got her." She struggled. The little pup growled fiercely despite his size. Another soldier grabbed the basket from her shoulder. A third forced heavy iron chains around her wrists. "No." Several wolves charged forward. Crossbows fired. Bolts struck the ground before them. The Black Wolf roared. He nearly reached Elara. A massive iron gate crashed down between them. The sanctuary shook. The wolves threw themselves against the bars. Nothing moved. Elara reached through the iron. "Take care of them." Tears blurred her vision. "Please." The little pup cried desperately from the other side of the gate. The Silver Elder gently nudged him backward. The old wolf understood. They could not save her. If every wolf died trying. The Black Wolf stood frozen. Golden eyes locked onto hers through the iron bars. Neither looked away. Not even when soldiers dragged her toward the entrance. The journey back to Ashen Hollow lasted 3 endless days. Snow fell almost constantly. Heavy chains rubbed raw against Elara's wrists. Yet she never complained. Each evening soldiers built fires beside the road. They shared warm stew among themselves. Elara quietly received stale bread and cold water. She accepted both with a grateful nod. Captain Darius noticed. On the second night he silently placed half his own meal beside her without saying a word. She looked up. "You'll need it more." He managed a tired smile. "You've been saying that your whole life." She looked surprised. "I've watched you since you were little." His gaze drifted toward the fire. "You always fed stray dogs before yourself." A long silence followed. Finally he whispered, "I should have stopped them." Elara shook her head gently. "You still can." He had no answer. When the mountains finally opened before them, Ashen Hollow stood exactly as she remembered. Smoke curled from familiar chimneys. Church bells echoed through frozen streets. Children played in the snow. Merchants sold bread beside the square. Life had continued. As though she had never existed. The gates opened. Word spread quickly. "The Omega's back." They caught her. "The witch has returned." Villagers flooded the streets. Some shouted curses. Others threw handfuls of snow. A few simply watched in silence. Elara searched the faces around her. She recognized nearly all of them. The shepherd. The baker. The old woman who once demanded herbs. Not one smiled. Yet, something had changed. Several looked away when she met their eyes. Shame had begun quietly replacing certainty. The High Alpha awaited her upon the temple steps. Lord Varric's black cloak snapped sharply in the winter wind. A satisfied smile crossed his face. I knew the forest would surrender its curse. He slowly descended the stairs until he stood directly before Elara. You've caused enough suffering. Elara lifted her head. No. Her voice remained calm despite the chains. The suffering began long before me. Varric's smile disappeared. Tomorrow. He turned toward the gathered crowd. The kingdom will witness justice. The people erupted into cheers. Execution platforms were already being built in the center of the square. As soldiers led Elara toward the old prison tower, snow continued falling across Ashen Hollow. Far beyond the mountain walls, deep within the ancient forest, every wolf lifted its head toward the moon. One howl rose into the frozen night. Then another. Then hundreds more answered from every valley, ridge, and hidden cave. The sound spread across the wilderness like an ancient summons carried by winter itself. Near the forgotten moonstone, the wounded black wolf climbed slowly onto a circle of silver rock bathed in pale moonlight. His shoulder still bled. His breathing remained heavy. Yet his golden eyes burned brighter than ever before. The ancient markings carved into the stone began to glow. Light climbed around him like flowing water. The air trembled. The mountain itself seemed to awaken. As the full moon reached its highest place in the sky, the curse that had chained him for countless years finally began to break. Morning arrived beneath a sky the color of cold iron. Snow drifted lazily over Ashen Hollow, softening rooftops and covering the narrow streets in a blanket of white. From a distance, the mountain kingdom looked peaceful, almost beautiful. Only the heavy silence betrayed the truth. The entire village had gathered before sunrise. Merchants left their stalls untouched. Blacksmiths allowed their forges to grow cold. Even children stood quietly beside their parents, bundled in thick wool cloaks as they watched soldiers surround the central square. At its center stood a weathered wooden platform. Fresh rope hung from a thick oak beam. The sight of it made several villagers look away. No one spoke. The temple bells rang once. Then again. Their slow echoes drifted across the mountains like a funeral song. Inside the prison tower, Elara sat beside a narrow window barely large enough to let in a strip of pale light. Snowflakes floated through the rusted bars before melting on the cold stone floor. She watched them quietly. The little patch of sky beyond the window reminded her of the clearing beneath the ancient oak. Of warm sunlight dancing through leaves. Of a tiny wolf pup proudly carrying mushrooms. Of the silver elder's calm eyes. And of the great black wolf whose silent presence had somehow made every frightening night feel less lonely. She closed her eyes. I hope you're safe. The words disappeared into the empty cell. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Captain Darius stopped outside the iron door. He looked older than he had only days before. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. His shoulders seemed heavier. For a long moment he simply stood there. Finally he spoke. They're ready. Elara nodded. So am I. He unlocked the cell without meeting her eyes. The chains around her wrists rattled softly as she stood. Before leading her away, Darius quietly placed something into her hands. A small leather pouch. The seeds? She asked. Inside were the tiny white flower seeds she had collected before being banished. He remembered. I found them in your basket. His voice was rough. I thought. He hesitated. They belonged with you. Tears shimmered briefly in Elara's eyes. Thank you. She tucked the pouch safely beneath her sleeve. Perhaps. Someday. Someone would plant them. Outside, the square had become a sea of silent faces. Snow settled upon shoulders and hats. No one brushed it away. Elara walked slowly through the crowd. Some people still glared at her with fear. Others refused to look at her at all. Then she noticed something unexpected. The shepherd. The old man whose dog she had healed months before. He stepped forward just enough to remove his wool cap. He lowered his head. Not in obedience. In apology. Nearby, a young mother quietly pulled her frightened daughter close. The little girl slipped free before anyone could stop her. She hurried toward Elara carrying a tiny bundle wrapped in cloth. A simple piece of bread. The child stretched out both hands. "My mama said." She swallowed nervously. No one should be hungry. Her mother looked horrified. "I'm sorry, my lord." She cried toward the guards. "I'll take her back." But Elara smiled warmly. She accepted the bread. "Thank you." The little girl smiled back. For the first time that morning, someone in the square smiled. Varrock noticed. His expression darkened. "Enough." His voice cracked through the silence. "Bring her forward." The execution platform stood beneath the oldest oak tree in the village. Centuries earlier, kings had been crowned there. Now, fear ruled from the same place. The priest opened the ancient book once again. Its brittle pages fluttered in the winter wind. "We gather today." His voice echoed mechanically. "To free the kingdom from the curse." Elara looked toward the crowd. None of the words reached her anymore. Instead she noticed small things. An elderly baker quietly crying behind folded hands. A young boy hiding his face against his father's cloak. Captain Darius staring at the ground. Snow collecting on abandoned footprints. Life continuing despite sorrow. The priest finished reading. Varrock stepped forward. "Any final words?" The square became perfectly still. Elara lifted her eyes toward the mountains beyond the walls. She smiled. Not because she expected rescue. Because she finally understood something. Home had never been the place that accepted her. Home had been the hearts that chose kindness. If hatred could save this kingdom. Her voice remained gentle. It would already be saved. Several villagers lowered their heads. But kindness still can. Silence answered her. Even the wind seemed unwilling to interrupt. Varrock frowned. "Tighten the rope." The executioner obeyed. Then, a howl rolled across the mountains. Long, deep, ancient. Everyone looked toward the northern gate. Another howl answered. Closer. Then another. Then dozens. Then hundreds. The earth itself seemed to tremble. Children clung to their parents. Guards tightened their grips upon their spears. Snow drifted from rooftops as countless voices echoed together beneath the winter sky. The great wooden gates shook violently. Boom. Once. Boom. Again. The iron hinges groaned. With a deafening crash. The gates burst inward. Not from fire. Not from siege engines. From wolves. Grey wolves. White wolves. Black wolves. Old wolves whose silver coats gleamed beneath the morning light. Young scouts moving like flowing water between frightened soldiers. They poured into the village in perfect formation. Yet something astonishing happened. Not one wolf attacked a child. Not one harmed an elder. Not one touched an unarmed villager. Instead they formed two silent lines stretching from the shattered gate all the way to the execution platform. Like an honor guard. Every eye followed the path they created. A lone figure slowly walked between them. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a dark cloak lined with black wolf fur. Long black hair rested against weathered armor unlike anything forged in ashen hollow. Across his shoulder hung an ancient silver clasp shaped like a crescent moon. His golden eyes shone with the same quiet power Elara had known inside the forest. The Black Wolf. No, not anymore. He had become the man he was always meant to be. The curse was gone. The Alpha King had returned. A gasp spread through the square. The oldest villagers stumbled backward. One elderly woman whispered through trembling lips. "It can't be." The village historian fell to his knees. The Moon King. Captain Darius slowly removed his helmet. Recognition crossed his face. Varrock's confident smile vanished completely. No. He shook his head. You're dead. The Alpha King stopped before the execution platform. His calm gaze settled first upon Elara. She barely recognized him. The sadness remained. The kindness remained. Only now they looked through human eyes. Without speaking, he gave the slightest nod. A promise. I'm here. Then he turned toward Varrock. You buried the truth. His voice carried effortlessly across the silent square. But truth grows stronger beneath stone. He raised one gloved hand. Several wolves stepped forward carrying ancient wooden chests strapped across their backs. The lids opened. Inside rested scrolls sealed with silver wax. Crowns blackened by age. Broken swords. Ancient banners. The village historian rushed forward. His trembling hands lifted the nearest scroll. He stared. Then looked toward the crowd. The royal seal. His voice cracked. It's authentic. Another scroll. Another seal. His face turned pale. It records the murder of King Aldrin. He looked directly at Varrock. By his own first general. The crowd murmured. Another document. It names the general's descendants. His voice became almost a whisper. The Varrock bloodline. The square erupted. No. That can't be. He lied to us. The prophecy. The forest. Every accusation once aimed at Elara turned toward the High Alpha. Varrock drew his sword. Lies. The Alpha King's expression never changed. He pointed toward the final relic. A weathered stone tablet. Captain Darius lifted it carefully. The inscription matched the murals inside the forgotten sanctuary. One line remained perfectly preserved. The moon's promise belongs to compassion, never to fear. Silence returned. Heavy. Unavoidable. Every lie Varrock had built his power upon collapsed in a single morning. Then something unexpected happened. Several soldiers quietly lowered their weapons. One by one. Steel touched snow. Captain Darius stepped forward. He removed the High Alpha's crest from his armor. It fell into the snow between them. I swore. His voice remained steady. To protect this kingdom. He looked at Varrock. Not your lies. More soldiers followed. Swords dropped. Shields lowered. Even villagers began stepping away from the High Alpha. The shepherd. The blacksmith. The baker. Fear was losing its grip. For the first time in decades, Ashen Hollow stood together. Not behind power. Behind truth. Varrock looked around wildly. He stood alone. Hatred twisted across his face. If I cannot rule this kingdom. He backed toward the ancient temple. Then none of you will. His hand disappeared beneath his cloak. When it emerged, it held a jagged black horn carved from something far older than any living beast. The Alpha King's expression changed instantly. No. He took one step forward. Don't. Varrock laughed. You should have stayed buried. He raised the horn. Then blew. The sound that emerged did not resemble any instrument forged by human hands. It was low. Broken. Monstrous. The mountains answered. Deep beneath Ashen Hollow. The earth began to shake. Cracks raced across the frozen square. Temple bells rang wildly without anyone touching them. Snow slid from rooftops. The oldest oak tree shuddered as though something enormous had awakened beneath its roots. Far below the mountain, a pair of glowing eyes slowly opened after centuries of restless sleep. The true guardian of the ancient forest had heard the call. The first crack split the village square like a bolt of lightning frozen in stone. It began beneath the ancient oak where generations of kings had once been crowned. The frozen earth groaned, then heaved upward. Snow slid into widening fractures as centuries-old paving stones shattered one after another. People stumbled backward. Children cried out. Horses broke free from their reins and galloped through the streets in panic. The temple bells rang wildly overhead, though no human hand touched them. Another violent tremor swept through Ashen Hollow. Entire buildings shook. Stone chimneys collapsed into narrow alleys. Dust rolled across the village like a grey tide. Varrock laughed. The sound echoed above the chaos. You wanted the truth. His eyes burned with desperate triumph. Then watch the truth bury you all. The black horn slipped from his fingers and struck the broken ground. It shattered into black fragments. Too late. The ancient call had already reached its destination. Far beneath the mountain, something enormous moved. A roar unlike anything the kingdom had ever heard rose from the depths of the earth. It was not the cry of a wolf, nor the voice of any beast remembered in stories. It sounded older than language itself, older than kingdoms, older than fear. The mountains answered with echoes that rolled across every valley. The Alpha King's face tightened. He turned toward Elara. We must reach it. Captain Darius looked around at the terrified villagers. What is it? The Alpha King's voice remained calm despite the destruction surrounding them. The last guardian. The protector of the moon's promise. Darius frowned. If it's a protector, why is it attacking? The Alpha King's golden eyes reflected both sorrow and understanding. It isn't attacking. He looked toward the widening crack splitting the village apart. It is waking. The ground finally burst open. Stone exploded into the air. An enormous shape slowly climbed from the darkness beneath Ashen Hollow. At first the villagers could only see its claws, each one longer than a man's arm, carved from dark stone wrapped in living roots. Then came its massive forelegs. Its body rose higher, higher still, towering above rooftops. The creature resembled a wolf. And yet far more. Its coat looked woven from bark, moss, crystal, and moonlight. Ancient trees seemed to grow across its shoulders. Vines hung from its enormous neck. Its eyes glowed with soft silver light that carried neither hatred nor mercy, only unbearable age. Every movement caused roots to burst from the frozen earth. Flowers bloomed wherever those roots touched the snow. The guardian was not a monster. It was the forest itself given life. Yet centuries of loneliness had made it impossible for anyone to remember the difference. The villagers screamed. Many fled toward the gates. Others dropped to their knees. The guardian slowly lifted its head. Its silver eyes drifted across the village. Searching for something it had once known. Then its gaze settled upon Varrock. The High Alpha raised his sword. You obey me. He shouted toward the impossible creature. I awakened you. The guardian did not even acknowledge him. Instead, it looked past him, toward Elara. The Alpha King stepped forward. Wolves. Immediately the united packs spread across the square. Not to attack, to guide. Grey wolves gently nudged frightened children toward safe streets. Large black wolves stood between collapsing buildings and fleeing families. The Silver Elder barked sharply. Scouts rushed through the village, leading elders away from dangerous walls moments before they fell. Captain Darius stared in amazement. There. He watched a white she-wolf carefully pull an injured little boy away from falling stones by the back of his coat without harming him. They're saving everyone. The Alpha King nodded once. They always were. Varrock refused to surrender. Consumed by rage, he gathered the few soldiers who still remained loyal. Kill it! He screamed. Kill them all. The arrows never reached their target. Every shaft snapped apart in the air as invisible roots burst from the earth. The Guardian finally looked directly at Varrock. Not with anger. With disappointment. Varrock charged anyway. His sword flashed toward the enormous creature. The blade struck one of its ancient claws. Steel shattered instantly. The broken pieces scattered across the snow. For the first time, fear entered Varrock's eyes. He stumbled backward. This. His voice trembled. This isn't possible. The Guardian took one slow step. The ground answered. Ancient roots wrapped gently around Varrock's ankles. Then his wrists. Then his chest. Not crushing. Holding. The forest itself had judged him. Yet the Guardian did not stop. Its silver eyes slowly swept across every human gathered in the square. Its breathing grew heavier. The mountain trembled once more. The Alpha King's expression darkened. It still remembers. What? Captain Darius asked. The betrayal. The Guardian had slept for centuries beneath the weight of broken promises. It no longer knew friend from enemy, pain from protection. Its sorrow threatened to become another disaster. The Alpha King looked toward Elara. Only one person could reach it now. She stepped forward before anyone asked. The chains had already fallen from her wrists. Fresh snow crunched beneath her boots. Behind her came countless voices. Don't. It's too dangerous. You'll die. She kept walking. The wolves did not stop her. Instead, they quietly formed a path. Just as they had on the morning the Alpha King entered the village. The Silver Elder walked beside her for several steps. Then gently pressed his nose against her hand. A silent farewell. Or perhaps, a blessing. The little wolf pup limped after her. She knelt. You stay here. The tiny wolf whined softly. She kissed the top of his head. I need you to protect everyone else. Reluctantly, he obeyed. The Guardian lowered its massive head as Elara approached. Each of its breaths stirred snow into gentle spirals around her feet. She looked impossibly small beneath its towering form. She did not carry a weapon. Only the little leather pouch Captain Darius had returned that morning. Inside rested the tiny white flower seeds she had gathered before everything changed. She slowly opened her hand. The seeds rested against her palm like scattered stars. I don't know your name. Her voice trembled only slightly. But I know what loneliness feels like. The Guardian remained still. Its glowing eyes reflected the tiny figure standing before it. They were afraid. She glanced back toward the villagers. They forgot. A tear slipped down her cheek. So did I. She knelt upon the broken earth. With cold fingers she pressed the tiny seeds into the snow-covered soil between the Guardian's enormous paws. They may never bloom today. She smiled gently. But someday. Someone will see them. Silence. The mountain waited. The wolves waited. Even the wind seemed to disappear. Then, something impossible happened. The frozen ground softened. Warmth spread outward beneath Elara's hands. Tiny green shoots pushed through the snow. White blossoms opened one after another despite the heart of winter. The same flowers carved beside the ancient crescent in the forgotten sanctuary. The Guardian lowered its great head. Very slowly. It touched its forehead against Elara's. Just as the Silver Elder had on the first night in the forest. A memory awakened. Not only inside the Guardian. Inside the land itself. Visions shimmered through the air. Ancient kings walking beside wolves. Children laughing beneath moonlit trees. The first promise. The bond that fear had buried but never destroyed. The Guardian remembered. A gentle silver light spread across its enormous body. The roots holding Varrock tightened. Not violently. Inevitably. He struggled. Screamed. Blamed everyone except himself. You did this. He shouted toward Elara. You ruined everything. She simply looked at him with quiet sadness. No. The truth did. The roots slowly carried him into the earth from which they had risen. Stone closed peacefully above him. No blood. No spectacle. Only silence. The mountain accepted its judgment. The forest needed no revenge. Justice was enough. The storm clouds above Ashen Hollow slowly drifted apart. Sunlight spilled across the snow. The Guardian lifted one final howl toward the sky. This time, every wolf answered. Their voices rose together across mountains, rivers, and forests until the entire kingdom seemed to sing with them. Then the great Guardian began dissolving. Its body became streams of glowing roots. Its ancient bark crumbled into rich earth. Crystal light scattered among the trees. Flowers bloomed wherever it vanished. At last, only one enormous white blossom remained where it had stood. The last Guardian had returned to the forest it had always loved. Winter slowly surrendered to spring. Snow melted from the mountains. Clear streams carried fresh water through every valley. The burned places within the ancient forest filled once more with green life. Young trees rose where blackened trunks had fallen. Birdsong returned. So did hope. Ashen Hollow changed with the seasons. The old laws built upon fear were abandoned. No one was judged by birth again. The temple no longer preached strength without mercy. Instead, children learned the story of the moon's promise. Not as a legend. As history. Captain Darius refused every offer to become the next High Alpha. "I've spent too many years following orders." He smiled quietly. "It's time I learned to serve instead." He devoted his life to rebuilding the villages damaged by the conflict, earning respect not through authority, but through humility. The shepherd planted wildflowers where the execution platform had once stood. The little girl who had offered Elara bread returned often to water them. Every spring, they bloomed. The Alpha King reclaimed neither throne nor palace. He rebuilt something far more precious. The ancient bond. Stone bridges connected the kingdom to the forest once more. Hunters traveled beside wolves instead of chasing them. Medicine was shared freely between both peoples. The forgotten sanctuary became a place of learning where elders passed old stories to children beneath the restored murals. Nothing was hidden anymore. Nothing needed to be. As for Elara, she never asked for titles. She never wanted crowns. Most mornings she could still be found walking quiet forest paths with her familiar woven basket resting against her shoulder. She gathered herbs beneath the same towering trees. She rescued birds fallen from nests. She treated injured paws and broken wings. The little wolf pup, no longer very little, followed faithfully at her side. The Silver Elder grew slower with each passing season, but he still insisted on joining her walks whenever he could. Sometimes they reached the great hollow oak where everything had begun. There, the Alpha King often waited beneath its branches. Not because duty required it. Because peace was worth sharing. They would sit together in comfortable silence while wolves rested nearby and sunlight filtered through leaves dancing gently in the wind. No promises needed to be spoken. The forest already knew. Years later, travelers crossing the mountains often told a quiet story. They spoke of a woman who never walked alone. Whenever storms rolled across the peaks. Whenever snow buried lonely roads. Or frightened children lost their way beneath ancient trees. A grey wolf would appear from the shadows. Then another. Then another. They would guide the lost safely home before vanishing into the forest without asking for thanks. Some believed they were only wolves. Others whispered they were guardians of an old promise. But those who truly listened to the wind already knew the truth. The world had once abandoned an Omega girl because it believed kindness was weakness. The ancient forest had seen something different. And because one frightened girl chose compassion when she had every reason to choose bitterness. An entire kingdom remembered what it meant to be a family again. From that day forward, no child of Ashen Hollow grew up fearing the howl of a wolf. They smiled when they heard it. Because they knew someone was watching over the mountains. Someone who had never forgotten the promise that love, once planted like the smallest seed, could grow strong enough to heal even the oldest wounds.